Good evening, everyone. Make sure my volume's up there. Okay, thank you all for joining us tonight. Just before we get started here, I want to let everyone know we do have a cap of 100 and we are quickly approaching that, which is fantastic. If for some reason you do leave and try to get back in and are not able to, you can certainly visit our Facebook page. We are streaming live on our Facebook page as well. So if you do get somehow disconnected, please join us on there. You're always welcome to try and come back in, but I do expect that we'll have a full house tonight, which is a funny thing to say. But we are excited that you're all here, and we're excited for this presentation. Thank you all for joining us, and thank you for being here on this stormy Thursday night. First of all, I just want to say if you do have any questions throughout the presentation, please use the Q&A button. That will send the questions to me. If it's technical stuff, I'll try and answer those right away. If it's a question for the presenter, we will get to as many of those as we can at the end of the presentation. So please use the Q&A function and we'll do our best to answer those. I'd also like to extend a special thank you to everyone who has made a financial contribution to Montgomery History. We are extremely grateful for all of that, all of those, and we could not offer these programs without your support. And we're excited for that. And again, working on lots of new programming, lots of great things coming up. Next week, we will be doing another History Conversations Rewind. I'm taking a vacation. I'm excited about that. But next week we'll be replaying the Segregated Schoolhouses talk from Ralph Buglas, which is a fantastic talk. And I think everyone who did see it enjoyed it. And I know if you have not seen it, you will definitely enjoy it as well. To view that, you can go to our website at montgomeryhistory.org. And if you click on the MH Online button at the very top, and then click Watch History Conversations. We will have that posted on Tuesday, so you can take a look at that. And then after that, the week after next, which I believe will be, the date on that will be the 15th, we will be having a presentation by Katie Dishman, who is the archivist at the Marriott Foundation, on the fascinating history of the Marriott hotels and their origin. Which is a great presentation. Let's see, there was something else that I almost forgot. Oh yes, okay, last thing. At the end of the presentation, and also tomorrow afternoon, you should receive an email with a link to a survey. That is just a few short questions where we just want to get some feedback on the History Conversations. Please fill that out. That will help us offer even better programming for you. We want to be able to fit your needs and what you want to learn about. So with that, I think I'm done. I hope I'm done. Susan, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm done talking, so you are free to go. Susan, take it away.
Okay. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. Let's see. I'm going to share my screen and we will get started. I'm here tonight to talk about Clara Barton. And I thought this was already set up. Okay, so I'm here tonight to talk about Clara Barton and her experience, her first experience taking the field at the Battle of Antietam. So I have a master's in military history with Civil War concentration. From 2010 to 2014, I was the superintendent and really a project manager for the National Museum of Civil War Medicine's project of bringing the Missing Soldiers Office Museum standing that up in Washington, D.C. So I got to spend 4 wonderful years really studying Clara Barton in detail. And I just found out that she was a completely wonderful person. I was fascinated and surprised by the things I learned about her. I'd already worked out at Antietam National Battlefield for a few years, so I knew she was there, but I didn't know much about her experience, other than it was the fact that was the first time that she had ever gone out and actually participated in a battle itself. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Let me tell you a little bit about Clara Barton. Here's a picture of her. She's about 18, 20 years old. She was born and raised in North Oxford, Massachusetts. Her parents were probably upper middle class. Her father had several businesses, a mill. He participated in local politics. They were very involved in their community church, which was Universalist Unitarian. And she was actually started her first 18 years as an adult. She was an educator, a teacher. So, you know, she was raised pretty liberally, even though her family was religiously fairly conservative for the time. So she was a tomboy, and she wanted to be independent. And so rather than marrying, she took up a role as a teacher, which is one of the few things women could do back in the mid-19th century. And she really had a good time doing that until she got a job in Bordentown, New Jersey. She actually started a school there, a free public school there, and it was so popular at the end of the school year, it had exploded. And so she asked them to build her a school building, which they did, and then they promptly hired a man to be the principal, which insulted her greatly because she had done all of the organization and, you know, built up this great thing and convinced the town to keep it, and then they replaced her. So she was very unhappy and moved to Washington, D.C. You can see here, these are different things and that happened to her over her lifetime. These are some of the leading roles that she had. She was a nurse for her brother for a while when he was injured for about 2 years while she was a teenager, then an educator for 18 years. Obviously, she had a lot of administrative experience. She became a humanitarian in her own right and an internationally famous humanitarian. She was also an activist. This is one of the things a lot of people don't really realize. She advocated for bloomers for women, so a more reasonable dress for women in the 19th century. She also advocated for African American rights when really there was a very small percentage of people doing that. Goes beyond, you know, abolitionism. She was an abolitionist, but then later on she supported African American civil rights and was very, very active in that. She also supported women's suffrage, and she wanted to get more involved in a lot of these things, but she wasn't able to do that because she spent all of her time focusing on establishing the American Red Cross. With that aspect of her life at the American Red Cross, she also became a diplomat. And so she was very, very busy. She always stayed busy, and she accomplished a whole lot of things that, you know, if I accomplish 1/25 of that in my lifetime, I'll be doing great. So after Bordentown, that disappointment in Bordentown, she moved to Washington, D.C. She always wanted to see it, and she didn't want to go back to Massachusetts. So she did get a job at the patent office. Now she bounced back and forth between jobs in DC and going back home, because back then most positions in Washington were political patronage positions, and depending on who the administration was or who, you know, her boss's boss might be, that all depended on her ability to get work and maintain it. So at one point she was the first woman who was recognized in her own right as a federal government employee who was paid at the same wage as the men that she worked with. So that was kind of a biggie. Of course, it had the adverse effect of getting her and all other women thrown out of their offices in Washington, so governmental positions. So, you know, it had its ups and downs, to say the least. So when the Civil War breaks out, or right before the Civil War breaks out, actually it was the Lincoln administration came into power. She was a self-proclaimed Republican, even though she didn't have the right to vote. She's very opinionated. She came back to Washington, D.C., and of course the Civil War starts. She was very anxious to contribute to the war effort, but she didn't really know her place there because she wasn't a traditional woman in those days. Her father was on his deathbed, and she went back to Massachusetts in, I believe it was early 1861, and spoke with him about it. And he told her that she should do what she wanted to do, that if she was worried about propriety, that men would accept her if she was respectable and, you know, the pious person that she ought to be. If she was respectful, basically, then they would accept her and appreciate all that she wanted to do for them. And that's exactly pretty much what happened. She had some resistance to that. She struggled with how to accomplish this until the 6th Massachusetts Infantry was on their way down from Massachusetts and were involved in the Baltimore riots. When that happened, the regiment was actually put in the U.S. Senate chambers because Abraham Lincoln had called for 75,000 troops to come to Washington and help put down the rebellion, and had no preparations ready for them when they arrived. So they were sticking people wherever they could to make sure, you know, to get them housing and figure out food and, you know, how to equip them and get them trained. I mean, they really were very unprepared. And so she kind of came, first she went to visit them and realized what kind of dire straits they were in. So she started going home, and she would collect what she had, go out and purchase things, ask friends to donate items, personal hygiene items, you know, fresh clothing, washcloths, toothpaste, or, you know, tooth powder, or whatever they were using at the time. She would take those and deliver them. She started a writing campaign as well to the state of Massachusetts because she thought that the citizens of Massachusetts should support them. Well, the long, you know, the short story for that long bit was that she ended up becoming like a little American Red Cross in a way. She started becoming a deliverer of goods, a supplier for the army, and of course she was supplying all this for free. She expanded her writing campaign and started writing to her friends in New Jersey that she still had, and friends in New York from when she had gone to college there. And next thing you know, she has all of this stuff and nothing to do with it. So she had found a real niche for herself, and it was really important to her that she make this contribution to her country when it was in peril. One of the things that her parents instilled in her was a huge sense of patriotism. Her father was a veteran, and he always told her war stories from when he was in the French and Indian, not the French and Indian wars, but anyway, he told her war stories from when he was in the military before she was born, and she really had this great sense of a need for helping the war effort. So after a while, she does get out, not exactly to the field, but she volunteers to go out and help nurse soldiers who had been wounded in the early battles and were waiting to be transported back to Washington. So Cedar Mountain, the Battle of Cedar Mountain in Virginia is a good example of it. She wasn't really very close to the battlefield. She was several miles away. And what would happen was, as the military could, they would bring wounded soldiers into a train depot area where they would be set to take trains, and they would transport them back to to hospital centers like Washington, D.C., Philadelphia. There was a whole system that they kind of threw together to get this taken care of, to get these soldiers the care that they needed. And she was seeing a lot of suffering going on because the military was completely unprepared for this. As you can see here on this slide, I have two of the major players in all of this. One is, at the time he was a major, Daniel Rucker. This is him over here on the right-hand side. He ends up being General Daniel Rucker, and he becomes eventually the Quartermaster General of the Army after Montgomery Meigs. He's his deputy at this time. And actually, after the war, Phil Sheridan married his daughter. So he was somebody no one ever hears about anymore, but really made some major contributions. She goes and visits him at his office, trying to find some kind of way to get her supplies out to the battlefield. Sits outside his office all day waiting for an appointment. When she finally gets in to see him and he says, "How can I help you?" She bursts into tears. He's like, "Oh my goodness, dramatic female in my office." So finally she gets out and tells him that, well, she really wants to deliver supplies to the field, and she has 3 warehouses full of material that, that they could really use. And of course, his statement was, "Did you say 3 warehouses full?" So she had gone into actually renting warehouses to stock all these supplies that she had received and was continuing to receive. So she kind of got his attention there. At first, of course, he was very skeptical. They didn't think at that time women could handle being out on the battlefield because, they would probably faint, get in the way, couldn't handle it. And so they were very skeptical about sending her out there. But she was a pretty well-spoken, confident woman. And she finally convinces Major Rucker to give her the opportunity to take a wagon out to the field. So he agrees that, okay, next time he thinks they're going to have something worthy, that he would send her a teamster in a wagon. This other gentleman here on the left is Surgeon General William Hammond, and he was new Surgeon General, up and coming, very young major. He was a doctor in the U.S. Army, and he was absolutely brilliant. He brought in Dr. Jonathan Letterman as the medical director for the Army of the Potomac to clean up the problem that they're having of soldiers dying on the field, waiting to be brought off, waiting to receive medical treatment. And so they had a big problem they had started working on in 1862, and Dr. Letterman was devising an evacuation system for evacuating the wounded off the battlefield. And they were waiting for a time to test it. And meanwhile, he was training people who were going to be working as field medics, and he was reorganizing the way the hospitals were set up and run. So they were working really hard on trying to get this fixed. So on September 13th, Clara receives a note from a courier who she refused to ever name during her lifetime, a secret note from the War Department, or somebody in the War Department, saying there was a threat at Harper's Ferry and not a moment to be lost. So she sprung into action, grabbed everything she could think of. A wagon shows up at her boarding house on 7th Street in Washington, which is now a museum. And she takes it to her warehouse. She enlists a friend of hers. His name was, he was a reverend actually, Cornelius Wells, to come out with her on this foray. She didn't know exactly what to expect. Robert E. Lee had taken his army and started moving north into Maryland. And so the Army of the Potomac was sent out after him. She received her invitation to join the Army and got the forms that she needed, the paperwork that she needed to go. So she takes off as soon as they can fill up the wagon, which they did as well as they could, and heads down Route 355, which we all know as Rockville Pike today, right in Montgomery County, to follow the Army out. She was following the 12th Corps. They were the last part of the Army on a very, very, very long Army train. And she did remark that she stopped at every town on the way to buy up as much goods as she could with what money that she had. So bread was one of the things that she particularly mentioned. Now we have here, this is a really nice, of course, this is Rockville during the Civil War, and I hadn't looked too closely at it before, and now I see Deb Stewart written everywhere in 1863, so I apologize for that. But this is basically how Rockville was set up. There wasn't, too much of the town to go through, but she did go through there. She didn't remark on meeting anyone in particular. She was so focused on catching up with the Army. So she follows the Army through Frederick, Maryland, and gets off on the old National Pike, which is now Route 144, and continues on her way. She goes through Middletown, buys up everything that she can get that they might have left there. And she doesn't really give specifics. So I have a feeling by the time she gets to Frederick, there's probably not much left of things for her to purchase, because the Army's probably procured them all, especially once the Confederates get there, and pretty much Frederick is cleaned out. So she follows the Army, and she's really getting frustrated because it's taking a long time. This Army train is could be up to 16, 17 miles long. Her role was in the very back, so she was after everybody. And so she was very, very frustrated by the time she arrives at South Mountain. Now she gets there on the 15th, just after the engagement, and or a few hours after the engagement. So both of the armies have kind of moved forward, and she expects to find a whole bunch of wounded soldiers on the field. And so it was really telling that when she passed out of Middletown and got into that beautiful little valley that is in South Mountain, which is sort of depicted here in this scene, she finds, surprisingly, that all of the wounded have already been transported, cared for and transported and moved to a field hospital. I forgot to mention that she also had a pet regiment, the 21st Massachusetts. And the 21st Massachusetts didn't start out with the Army of the Potomac, but they were now with the Army of the Potomac. And they were men from her area of Massachusetts. So they were from Worcester and the Oxford. And as a matter of fact, I read over 40 of them were former school children of hers, but I can't, I'm a little skeptical about that number. Let's say quite a few of them, she knew personally, and so she had a vested interest in this regiment who had actually participated in the battle. She couldn't find them. I believe they were at Fox's Gap. So she goes to Fox's Gap looking for them, doesn't find them, is totally surprised and pleased to find the wounded are already being cared for and no one's laying out on the field, waiting for assistance. There is one story that goes along with this, and that is that, and I haven't been able to actually verify it, but it's a nice story. She was going up Route 144, Sharpsburg Pike, and she comes across a Union officer who says, ma'am, there's some Confederates over there that are very, very hungry. I can't do anything for them, but once I leave, if the bull over here in this pasture kind of got loose and got on the other side of the road and kind of wandered over to them, there's really not anything I could do about it at this point. So, and he kind of, I guess, winks at her, and so she evidently went along with it and let the bull out of the pasture and kind of moseyed on her way. One of the interesting things about South Mountain, though, is that, you know, nightfall has hit them, and, you know, the Army is hard at work, but the wagon train is stopped and pulled over on the side of the road. So she realizes this is her opportunity to get ahead. So she tells her teamsters, hey, let's get back on the road. We'll pass up all this traffic and hopefully make some headway getting in, you know, catching up with the Army. She's heard that the 21st Massachusetts is with Burnside in his 9th Corps, and that they are headed to Sharpsburg. So she decides she's going to do the same. So sure enough, they hitch it up. They pass most of the Army, and they catch up to the artillery, which is the back part of the main part of the Army, and is hit Sharpsburg in the evening. Oh no, I'm sorry, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. So she hits the Army in Sharpsburg, I think on the 16th. Yes, it was on the 16th. So we don't know if she met with Dr. Letterman. I believe that she probably would have stopped at Army headquarters to find out where Burnside was, because that wouldn't have been very clear. There were very few routes as well to get there, so she probably would have gone down the same route, ended up over by the Pry House, and found out from somebody at headquarters that, you know, where Burnside was. She felt comfortable. Burnside was very supportive of her. They would be friends even, you know, after the war was over, or at least, you know, good acquaintances. And he was supportive of her. So she joins the Army at Sharpsburg, and she bivouacs with the 21st Massachusetts at the Henry Rohrbach farm, which is down in the bottom part of the field by what's now called Burnside Bridge. It was the Rohrbach Bridge. So Henry Rohrbach's farm, this is a picture of the house right here. It's still there. As you can see, there's a bicycle on the porch. So obviously this is a more modern picture. It is down by the, along the road near the bridge. And so it's a little bit north of the bridge. So, and she writes about how the camp was in the hollow of a field. And so little did she know. Now she did make some comments and made some pretty good comments later on when she wrote some lectures that she gave all over the United States. And she wrote that everyone knew that two great armies of 80,000 men were lying there face to face, only waiting for dawn to begin the battle. This gave a terrible sense of oppression. Then the camp was in a hollow, which was filled with men and beasts. It was a close, soggy night, and there seemed to be no air to breathe. It was all used and made fetid by this press of human beings and animals. So this is the evening, the 16th before the battle. You know, that's one of the things that can be said about the battle is that McClellan was awfully nice to wait for her to catch up. She was able to do that and meet with the 21st Massachusetts and spend a little bit of time with them. But she wrote that, you know, that this oppression on the battlefield the night before was, she couldn't sleep. She knew it was going to be a horrific scene the next day. And of course, certainly it was. Now, I have a few statistics here about the battle overall, and that it was fought on September 17th. Right before dawn. It was about a 12-hour battle for those of you who aren't Civil War fanatics like me. And there were over 23,000 casualties that would be dead, wounded, and missing. So over 23,000 casualties in that battle, making it the bloodiest day in American history. So what a time to show up on a battlefield, right? For your first battlefield experience. The worst one of the war. That took place in 12 hours, and she'd be right in the thick of it. Here's a little map that I wanted to show you, talking about, you know, to give you an idea of the field if you haven't been there. If you haven't been there, shame on you. Next time you can get out, I highly, highly recommend it. It's one of the nicest Civil War battlefields that's been preserved by the Park Service. It's small. The town of Sharpsburg still doesn't even have McDonald's, or they don't even have a gas station in the town. So, you know, it's very quaint, very close to the time of the battle in looks and the views that you get. It's just a tremendous place. And they are, you know, it's just a tremendous place to go, and it's very well done. And I also want to give a shout out to right here, because I think this, I'm not sure, I apologize, I can't remember, but I think this might be one of the Civil War Trails maps, and I understand they put a shout out for this talk tonight, so I really, really appreciate that. Their maps are awesome. I highly recommend them for, you know, anyone who is going to a Civil War battlefield or on a Civil War, you know, tour ride. I would love to talk to you about that sometime, because I did the Jeb Stuart ride around McClellan and around Richmond, and his ride around Gettysburg, you know, for the Gettysburg campaign, and it was a lot of fun. Thank you to Civil War Trails. So the morning of the battle, Burnside is down here at the southern end of the field. You see his name right here, just about where it says the word ford, I think is where that I may be wrong about this. This is where Clara was. Okay, so yeah, I think it was right around this area. Anyway, she was somewhere in the field. Burnside was having a little problem communicating with his boss, who he was very good friends with, and he had a perceived slight going on, and kind of a miscommunication with General McClellan. And so he was a little bit, I don't want to say obstinate, but he asked for clarification and delayed opening the battle in the south end of the field like he was supposed to do. Well, Clara was a very impatient person, and so she didn't want to wait around for things to happen when she could hear up here in the northern end of the field, Joe Hooker is absolutely engaged. The artillery is firing. She can hear all this stuff going on, and she wanted to be part of the action. So she hitches up her team and goes around, it goes up, Boonesboro Turnpike to Keedysville over the upper bridge, and then takes a circuitous route up over the north end of the field, and then comes down this road, the Smoketown Road right here, until she can't get any further, which is right where the word Mansfield is. That's the Smoketown Road to the Samuel Poffenberger farmhouse. Now, if you have been to Antietam, you know that Clara Barton, because of the great things that she did there, has her own monument there, but it is not where Mansfield is. It's up here in the northern end of the field at the Joseph, I think it's Joseph Poffenberger. There are several Poffenberger farms right in this area. So the J. Poffenberger farm is up here in the northern part. That is where today you can find the monument, because it's been very controversial over where she was. So let me get to that. So this is a picture of the Samuel Poffenberger farmhouse. This is where I believe that Clara Barton spent her time. If you go back, that would be right here where the word Mansfield is. She talks about being around the 12th Corps. Other people wrote about it as well. The doctor at the Samuel Poffenberger farmhouse says Clara Barton was there. So she also describes the house in detail, especially the basement. And one of the things that she talks about is that there is an arch in the chimney, at the bottom of the chimney in the basement. This is not necessarily an unusual architectural feature, but it is not found in any of the other farmhouses in that area. So by reading on and conducting research on what all the participants said, who saw who where, and where they were themselves and their descriptions, I've come to the conclusion that she had to be at the Samuel Poffenberger farmhouse. So the Samuel Poffenberger farmhouse is right where this Mansfield, or the word Mansfield is here. So it's right behind the East Wood, just north of the East Woods. And when Clara arrives, she asks the people with her to go find the nearest field hospital, and then she takes off looking to help the wounded. So right away, she goes down and enters the battlefield. Now, a lot of people have argued that she wasn't on the battlefield. You know, she was a woman, et cetera, et cetera. She would stay at the field hospital. But considering what she wrote about, leaving her wagon and moving forward towards the field, towards the sound of battle, is one of the pieces of evidence I like to recognize. And the other one is that during that time, she was cradling a wounded soldier in her arms, giving him a sip of water, when a bullet came through her sleeve of her dress, where she was cradling him, and struck him in the body and killed him instantly. That's not a spent bullet that you're going to find far away from the battlefield. That was taking fire. So that's one of my major pieces of evidence that she actually fell under fire. Now, what she did was, and she did this on several battlefields, is she would go as close to the battlefield as she could get comfortably, which evidently was pretty hot, and help pull people off the battlefield, see what she could do for them immediately, because she had this innate sense, and probably from talking to some of the assistant surgeons and surgeons with the Army, she had this innate sense of exactly, how, they needed to get as quick care, as immediate care as they possibly could. Now, Dr. Letterman is instituting or implementing his plans for this new evacuation now. So people are actually starting to get off the battlefield. He was very successful at South Mountain, and the Army is going to be very successful on this absolutely horrific day with 23,000 casualties. They had everybody off the field within 24 hours, which really is just an extraordinary feat. So Clara Barton was at the East Woods. She helped there as much as she could. She ended up going into the Poffenberger farmhouse and assisting the doctor in there. It was, his name is escaping me right now. But they worked really hard. They had lines of people who needed emergency surgery. Just going all around this yard. This yard would have been completely filled up with people moaning, groaning, bleeding, asking for help. And so they were taking care of them as best they could. So that evening, the sun goes down, and the surgeon starts to get very upset and frets over the fact that he's going to have to discontinue surgery due to lack of light. Well, one of the things that she had learned in the battlefield experiences that she did have was that they need a lot of light. And so in the evening, so they could keep working. So one of the major things she put in her wagons were lanterns. And I believe she had up to something like 40 lanterns with her. So she went to the doctor and said, "No worries, I have lanterns. Let's bring them in and light the place up." And they did. After a while, everyone was exhausted, and the assistant surgeons couldn't work any longer, but Clara could. And so, she asked to help to assist the surgeon in surgeries, and at first he tried to say, no, there's no way you can do it, I can barely do it, but she convinced them that she could, and they spent the night conducting surgeries. As you'll notice here, I have this barrel. Another great story about this is a couple of days after the battle, she has gone from being an assistant surgeon to a cook, and she's making mush, I call it mush, gruel, I suppose, to serve the soldiers as best she can, but she runs out of meal. she was using cornmeal. Well, there were several barrels in the basement of that were cases of wine, and of course they were using the wine as well to, you know, help the soldiers. Although later on, of course, now we know that's not a good idea. She opened the last barrel, and the barrels that they had opened previously had been packed with sawdust. This last barrel was packed with cornmeal. And somebody remarked that you would never see, you know, such a celebration going on in that basement when they realized that they had cornmeal and a whole barrel full of it, so they could continue to feed those super hungry soldiers that were in really bad shape. Oops. So, aftermath of the battle. She did have another really interesting thing that happened. This Dr. Harwood approaches her a couple of days after the battle and says, hey, could you come over and help me? I had this difficult patient. I think she's a woman. I don't think it's a man. And Clara was like, what, a woman? No way. So she said, sure, I'll come over. And she had been shot kind of in the shoulder, close to the neck. So Clara asks him to bring her over in a wagon. And so he has some people get the patient and bring her over. And she gets in the wagon with her. And sure enough, she realizes that it's a young woman who actually cut her hair, fielded a uniform, because she had fallen in love with a soldier passing through Frederick, Maryland, and was just so fraught with anxiety over him going into battle that she followed him out to the battlefield. Clara calms the young lady down, finds out her name, where she was from and why she was there, and gives her a quick examination and tells the doctor, yes, she's been shot in the neck, but the bullet hasn't passed. So Dr. Harwood does quick surgery on the girl with no anesthesia because he didn't have any with them. But he said all he had to do was cut the skin, pull the bullet out. There was a little piece of bone fragment that he had to pull out, but as well. Making a long story short, not only does she survive, but she meets up. Her boyfriend was also wounded. They meet at a hospital in Frederick, and I believe they had a daughter who they named Clara. So I could be wrong on that. Don't, you know, send me to jail if that's one's wrong, but I think they were one of the couples that named a daughter after Clara. So Clara stays out on the battlefield actually for quite a long time. She exhausts all of her supplies. She delivers them to 13 field hospitals. When she first went out to the battlefield, she said that she would not help Confederates. She really disliked Confederates tremendously after hearing all the stories about how horrible they were. And of course, being a staunch Republican and abolitionist, you know, they didn't sit well with her. So, but she works really, really hard, delivers all of her supplies, and falls ill. Starts running a fever, starts feeling pretty poorly. Well, she does have this empty wagon. So her assistant, Mr. Wells, and the Teamsters make a bed in the back of the wagon, put Clara in, and take off for Washington. She said at that point there was really nothing more that she could do, that a lot of assistants had arrived on the field. Smoketown Hospital was the largest hospital, and they had plenty of people helping. So she felt pretty comfortable exiting the scene and returning to Washington. It did take her a while to recover. She did rejoin the Army in October, so, you know, like a month later, with 6 wagons this time, because she had proven her reliability and determination to not only the quartermaster, but to the Surgeon General. One of the things that I maintain and contend is that she became Surgeon General Hammond's secret weapon, because one of the things that, one of the interesting things about her role going to battlefields is that she was a civilian, so she didn't fall under the military rules. so she could move her wagon to wherever she wanted to take it, and it was welcome. And she received a lot of support because she provided a lot of assistance on the battlefield. So people were generally glad to see her. There were some old-fashioned gentlemen still in leadership positions who did a lot of trying to block her, but for the most part, she was able to get out to the battlefield. She also learned to strategically use relationships with government officials. She became very, very close to the senator from Massachusetts, Henry Wilson, and he was quite a supporter and quite a strategic friendship because he was the chairman of the Military Affairs Committee in the U.S. Senate. He had Abraham Lincoln's ear. And while she never met Abraham Lincoln, she got daily not necessarily daily, but she got regular communication to President Lincoln through Senator Wilson. Also, there were a couple of times during the war where she saw things going on that disgusted her to the max. She went to Fredericksburg and found the wounded out on the street because a lot of the civilians living there refused to open their homes. She went directly back to Washington, woke Senator Wilson up and told him what was going on. And the next day, Henry Halleck was on a train with some officers to Fredericksburg to straighten the situation out, which he promptly did. So, she was a master at figuring out these strategic relationships and using them to help her get what she needed. She would go on to participate in 2 more wars. She participated in the 1870s in the Franco-Prussian War. Using her experience. That's one of the reasons she did it, was because of her experience in the American Civil War. Even though she had gone to Europe to recover from her poor health that was caused by the American Civil War, that's another story. She would also participate in the Spanish-American War with the American Red Cross that she got established in 1881. And she went there herself and helped, and was quite an extraordinary feat. She was getting quite up in age at that point. She did establish the American Red Cross and moved the world to care after natural disasters. So when she first tried to establish the American Red Cross, one of the caveats that the government officials kind of told her behind the scenes was that they didn't want to support a wartime organization when they hoped to never be involved in any more wars. And so she saw that there were natural disasters going around that resembled battlefield disasters. And so she got the bright idea of, well, then we'll go to natural disasters and then we can be a fully functioning organization that isn't just held in reserve for war, which you don't hope is going to be happening. So she was able to get it established. Not only that, but she represented the American Red Cross at the Geneva Convention later on and introduced an amendment that was voted on and approved to move the International Red Cross and committee to start responding to natural disasters. So that was quite a feat. Another thing she did was establish first aid and safety training, which we all do. It took her quite a while to make that happen, but she did eventually. After she left the American Red Cross in 1904, she was still very active. The first aid and safety training was something she advocated for, and is a lasting legacy of hers. And that is all I have. And I am very, very happy. Thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it. I can take any questions. And, thank you so much for attending today, because it's, I'm really thrilled to be here, and I'm glad people are interested in learning more about Clara Barton and some of the extraordinary things she did during her lifetime. She died in 1912, by the way, the day before the Titanic sank. And so, you know, that kind of probably kind of dampened the celebration of her life, I want to say, because of, you know, all the focus going on the Titanic, which of course was a huge and horrible disaster. But it's just one of those anecdotal things that I think is kind of odd. This picture you see here at the end is her gravesite in North Oxford, Massachusetts. All the little grave markers that you see in the background is her family. She purchased this plot and had it and set it up in perpetuity. And this monument right here, this is her gravesite right there. So, any questions?
Okay, Susan, thank you so much. We have had a couple questions come in here. I did see a lot of people were asking where she was buried, which you have answered.
You go, North Oxford.
Okay, so someone here asks, when and why did Clarissa's name change to Clara Barton? Was it before the Civil War?
Yes, actually, this is a funny little anecdotal thing about her. She changed herself. It was well before the Civil War. I believe it was either while she was teaching or when she got down to Washington, D.C. that they, it kind of evolved over time. Her family first just called her Baby when she was very young. And then, you know, by the time she's a teenager, they started calling her Clara. And so she became known as Clara. And I think that, you know, it evolved to the point where when she started having to sign things, first she was signing Clara H. Barton, and then she just dropped the H and just went with Clara Barton after that. So, and she's named after a character in a popular novel of the day. So I still have to go back and find that novel because I want to find out about that person, why she was so popular. The Bartons named a baby after her.
Okay, someone asks, which came first, the International Red Cross or the American Red Cross?
The International Red Cross, absolutely. The first Geneva Convention actually took place in 1864 during the American Civil War. We sent Dr. Bellows, who was the head of the U.S. Sanitary Commission, to it. When he came back, he found absolutely zero interest in U.S. government to support that. And one of the primary reasons was that we're never going to fight in a war in Europe. So I always thought that was pretty hilarious that they thought that. And you know, we were fighting the Civil War at that time, so they were a little distracted. So it would take her till 1881 to get. I'm not exactly sure of the founding date of the International Red Cross, but she wasn't able to get a charter for the American Red Cross till 1881.
Okay. Let's see, where was it? Okay. Who is in the larger grave to the right of her that says Barton?
The larger grave.
So looking at I believe so you've got the Red Cross, and then to the right of it, there's another gravestone there.
Yes. I see her brother's name on there, but I don't think there's anyone actually buried there. I think that's basically the family monument that kind of marks the section of the graveyard where she's buried. So she purchased quite a large section at this cemetery and had all of her family moved to the section so they could all be together. And I think this monument here is no one is buried there. So this section right here with the big red cross, that's actually where her body lies, is in that section.
Okay. Let's see, what was the one here? I had a couple questions about what is her connection to Glen Echo, Maryland? I believe there's a Clara Barton house there.
Yes.
Thank you for the talk. Yeah.
And I am working on developing a presentation on that. She was invited by the Baltz's brother, who established Edward and oh gosh, they were two brothers. They both started with an E, Edward and Edwin, I think. Baltzy purchased all this land out in Glen Echo and started it and built it to Chautauqua. And in order to attract people to come out there from Washington to participate and enjoy it, they offered 5-acre plots to some famous people, and she was one of those people. At first, she just built a warehouse out there, and then she made it the American Red Cross headquarters after it was established. And then later on, she moved in and made it her own home. And so she actually died there in 1912. That's where she passed away, was in Glen Echo.
Oh, okay. Someone asks, did she ever take up any anti-war activism?
No. She was very patriotic, very supportive of everything that we did. I don't want to say she was that happy about war, especially, you know, there was a beautiful quote when she said that, you know, it's, I wish people say they wish men didn't know anything about fighting, or, oh gosh, I'm messing it up. There's this beautiful quote about how she wished men knew nothing about fighting because of how horrible it was. She got involved in the Spanish-American War because of the concentration camps. I can't remember, they had a Spanish name for them, for people who were put in these camps in Cuba just before the Spanish-American War. And that's how she got involved and got down there. Representing the American Red Cross. And then she got involved with assisting the war effort from there.
Okay, we'll do just a couple more because we are getting close to 8 o'clock here. Someone asks, did she ever marry?
Oh, everyone asked that. It's an interesting question. No, she didn't. Like I said, she decided when she was younger that she wanted to be a public servant, servant to mankind. And so she decided that if she married, she wouldn't be able to fulfill that goal because she would be obligated to take care of her family. And so she never married. She had several opportunities. There's a rumor that I love that she was going to marry Henry Wilson while he was vice president, and he died while she was getting ready to marry him. He passed away suddenly in the US Senate. And she also talked about a professor that she really loved, and if he had ever asked her, she would have married him, but this is later in life. So, you know, she definitely didn't want for love or proposals even, but she never married.
Okay, we'll do just a couple more here. Someone asks, was she the only woman who helped with the wounded and brought supplies at Antietam?
Absolutely not. There were women there. I was almost going to say a ton of women there, but there wasn't a ton of women there. But, you know, everyone in the local community helped. There were actually some, I'm trying to think of it. It's convents. There was a convent. There were nuns from the, I feel really bad. The college up by the border, up Route 15 by the border of Pennsylvania. Nuns from that area, and there were nuns around the United States in convents who had actually kind of got training in nursing. They would travel down to the battlefields to help. So there are lots of women, but they were generally relegated to the very back, and they ended up serving more in long-term hospitals, and their roles were very, very limited. So Clara was one of those people who were able to convince people to let her work up on the battlefield, and accepted that. And so she broke through a lot of glass barriers that other women just couldn't get through. So she had amazing personality and you know, was really, really extraordinary in that way.
Okay, I'm going to answer one here. Someone asks, will the Clara Barton and Glenn Echo talk be shown via Montgomery History? I'm not going to make any commitments because that's obviously up to Susan, but if she is willing, we will eventually find a time. I don't know where she is on preparing that presentation, but you subscribe to our newsletter, and once we get that scheduled, you'll be welcome to join us. And then we'll do one more question. I'm going to wrap it up here because it is after 8 o'clock.
Uh-oh.
Someone says, you mentioned that at the beginning of her time in the Civil War, she would not aid Confederates. Did she change her mind at any point?
The first time they came up and begged with puppy dog eyes, she absolutely changed her total opinion. And it was even one of her principles of humanity that she used with the American Red Cross was neutrality and impartiality. Because she felt like people were people. Once they were, first of all, she tried to stay neutral. You know, she started out obviously on the Union side, but once she realized that these were all humans, they all deserve to be treated with respect and given proper care. And so that melted away the first time she was approached by Confederates.
Okay. All right. Susan, is there a way, if people have any further questions, would you want them to email me, or do you have an email address that you would prefer that they use?
I'm sorry, I didn't put contact information on this. Yeah, they can email you and you can forward it to me, or my email address is srosenvold. So it's my first initial and my last name. It's real simple, @hotmail.com.
Okay, and of course, if you didn't get that, mine is you can send it to me at historyconversations@montgomeryhistory.org. And I realized I never introduced myself at the beginning of the presentation, so the mysterious voice that you've been hearing, my name is Matt Gagel. I am the Director of Programs at Montgomery History. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up. Susan, thank you so much. This was a great presentation. I apologize to anyone who didn't get their question answered. You know, we did run out of time, and I tried to pick some that would be universally interesting. But please email them to me, and I will pass them on to Susan. And Susan, any last closing thoughts?
Nope, I just want to say thank you, and thank you for your interest in Clara and the American Civil War. And I hope this inspires you to go and learn more.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone. And we'll see you next time. Have a good evening.
All right.
Thanks, Susan. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.